Hey everyone, welcome back to One Stop Tabletop. My name is Will, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a simple deck holder. These are cool little devices because they really help organize your game, help keep the flow going whenever you're playing, and basically they just sit there, they hold a deck of cards, and make it easy for you to draw the top card. Pretty easy. So let's go ahead and look at what materials we'll need before we begin on this project, and we'll start building. The first and one of the most important tools that you'll need is a hot glue gun. You can use any brand, any type, any price, anything in. This is pretty much the cheapest one that I could find, and it works perfectly for every project that I've ever used for it. Let's go ahead and get yourself a hot glue gun, and we'll move on to the next. We are also going to need an X-Acto knife or some kind of very sharp, fine blade. Scissors will not cut it for this project, and I don't know why you would, but things like large kitchen knives will probably also not cut for this project. You can find many of these at the dollar store. Pretty easy to find, and just regular old X-Acto knives will do you great. A trusty pencil will always get you very far in these types of projects. I do not recommend that you grab a pen. I do recommend that you grab a pencil. Something with a tip and an eraser is very important, just in case. We will also need a deck of cards that we want to build our deck holder for. You can use just one if you really need, but we are going to be using some of it for the height of the deck or the size of the stack of the cards. So I recommend that you use a whole deck, that way you know what height you need, but one card can suffice if you really need it in a pinch. Last but not least, we will also need some foam core. Foam core is an awesome material. If you're not familiar with this stuff, it is actually simply more or less two pieces of paper on top and bottom and some foam that is in the middle, hence the name foam core. This is great for just about every single project that I do. It's extremely lightweight, it's very easy to cut, it's very easy to shape into whatever it is that you're trying to do. It also works extremely well with things like a hot glue gun or any kind of paint that you might want to use. It's just a very, very versatile piece of equipment here, and we're going to be using a bunch of it. This stuff is very easy to find. You can find it any craft store, probably any hardware store too, or the dollar store where I got this for a buck. So go ahead and get yourself some foam core, all the other tools, and let's start building. Actually, before we begin, I do have to bring up a few small things. For one, my camera was on the fritz when making this. I just could not figure out how to get it to stay in focus on one area, so you might see it jump out in a little bit. I do apologize for that. The second more important part is that you'll notice that this entire video is done without the aid of a ruler or a straight edge. I do highly recommend that you get used to using a ruler and straight edge for these kinds of projects, but these are also very simple starting off, so if you don't have a ruler or don't feel like you need to use one or anything like that, that is totally fine. It's totally up to you, but I do recommend for future projects you start getting used to that. With that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. So I've already gone ahead and cut a piece of foam core to the correct size that we need, and I'm just going to take a card and lay it on here and line up the top, bottom, and left side. And I'm going to start making marks on the right side to get the correct size of the foam core to the size of our cards. You'll notice that I'm making dashes rather than doing a solid line. I usually find that makes it a lot harder if you do a solid line while also trying to hold down an object. So just put in the dashes and make your solid line to cut through later. Alright, now that we have our line, we're just going to take our X-Acto knife and begin cutting along the line that we've made. You don't need to press very hard into this stuff. Actually, don't even try to cut all the way through with one cut. That actually makes bad cuts. So just softly puncture through the paper on the top. Now that we've cut all the way through the foam core, you can see that you can actually sort of split the foam core, and it might have a slight breaking sound when you do this, which is totally normal. It's totally fine. But you'll notice that the back side we did not cut all the way through. I actually recommend doing this as a second step. You can fold it if you need to get a little crease, and you can cut the foam core from the back side or from the front side where you were cutting before. Whichever way is more comfortable for you. I've just always liked the back better. So next up is to get the height of our deck size here. I'm just going to take my deck of cards, put it down, and line it up to the left side again. This is one of those areas where I feel like a ruler would have helped me out a lot, but if you don't have one, don't want to use one, you can always just try to freehand it like I'm doing here. This will give you a basic line. I recommend going back over it so you have a darker line. You can just barely see it, but I could actually see it a lot better. I also recommend for this specific build that we're going to add on an extra layer of height, and the extra layer of height is actually just going to be the exact width of our foam core. So if you want, you can just lay down another piece of foam core, trace it, and we'll move on from there. So after we've cut the height piece out, we're going to go ahead and start doing our first gluing. Let's go ahead and heat up your hot glue gun, plug it in, whatever it is that it takes. And once we can get it off of our little piece here, we're going to start applying a very thin, even layer of hot glue to the top of the foam, or I guess the side, depending on how you're looking at it. And we need to move quickly here because hot glue does cool down rather rapidly. So we're going to take the top where our cards will be and line up one side right on top of where we just put the glue. And you'll want to hold it there for about 10 seconds, let it cool down and let it get into place. Now sometimes when you do this, you're not going to have put on enough glue on the gap there, but that's actually a good thing. What you can do is you can go back through and do a second layer or second coating to fill in that gap, just to give it a little bit more structural integrity, keep out any gaps from any cards getting stuck, and just kind of looking it better. If you're going to go through and paint these later, this is actually a really good step to fill in any gaps that you might not be wanting. So after you've made your first card holder, you're going to be gluing all these to a base. For each project, the base is going to be different depending on how you want to do it. For this one, I just did it the same length as each of the cards decks, but I actually didn't know how wide I wanted to make it, so I just used a really long piece and just glued each of them on as I went, and just cut off the excess later. You can certainly do that. You can also measure each of the actual card holders before putting them on and measure exactly how far you want it. It's all up to you. I recommend you experiment, figure out which way it is that works best for you, which way you think looks best, and just how you like doing it the best. Let's go ahead and give that a try for a couple different ones, and we'll show you how we glue it all together. Alright, now that first card holder is dry, we're going to go ahead and glue it to our base. So go ahead and cut out a second height piece and stick that right on the left side all the way. Nudge your card holder right up against it and keep a firm grip on that card holder. Take away the height, and we're going to trace where the card holder lays on the base. You can do this lightly. You don't really have to make it a couple lines and doing thick, because we're just going to add another line of glue for the back side or the right side of the card holder to go onto. And move quickly again because the hot glue does tend to dry and cool very quickly. Once you have it positioned, we're going to just press it down slightly, and we're going to do our front or left glue line for the bottom of the card holder. Just go all the way across, and just like that. Alright, so once you have a few more of these card holders that are glued down, we're just going to cut off the excess that's on the back side of our holder that we really don't want. I'm doing this right after having hot glued one of the previous holders on, so you can see I have a little bit of glue gunk there. That's totally fine. One of the beautiful things about hot glue is that it's very easy to use. It's very easy to cut through, especially when it's warm. You can see here how I'm also able to cut just slightly all the way through the foam core, break it in half, and then cut down the back side. Beautiful. Now that we have that part done, we're actually going to do the back side of the card holder. This is just to make sure that the cards don't slide too far while they're inside of the holder, and it kind of renders the whole thing pointless without this. So just go ahead and grab a scrap piece of foam core, line up what you have so far, and we'll measure the tops of each of the holder parts, and even that height part if you need it. Then we are going to trace the back side of the holder here, and we're just going to cut out this little piece. Alright, now that we have that back piece cut out, we're just going to go ahead and glue it right on. Let's go ahead and take your hot glue gun here and just make a nice little thin line that follows all the parts of your card holder that's going to be touching the back. If you're going to be gluing in a whole bunch of these, like 6 or 7 or more, I recommend that you do small little dots of hot glue and then go back later and fill in the gaps. That's just to make sure that it holds on before it cools. So here we're just going to apply the back. I'm going to give it just a little bit of pressure here and there to make sure that it's sized up correctly and that everything fits. Make sure there's nothing horribly gapped. And I'm just going to give it a little bit of extra pressure for a few seconds just to be sure that it all glues together nicely. Alright, here we go. Once it's all glued, you can see it's got a very nice basic shape and it works out well. Let's see what it looks like actually with a few cards in it. That looks pretty good with some cards in there. You can see how they're angled very nicely and they just look great in there. It's also very easy to draw the top card of each of these decks, as you can see right here. Alright, and there you have it. That is how I make simple little deck holders for all of my games. They're very basic, but they work extremely well. You can feel free to expand them to as many decks, discard piles, anything you'd like. Now, for the rest of this video, I'm actually going to take it up just one extra step, because you might notice when you start using this kind of deck holder that there's a small little problem that it has. Let's go ahead and take a small little look at what that is. So when we go to pull out our decks to shuffle it or anything, you'll notice it's actually kind of hard to grab each of these decks. I can't pull them out easily. So it's not a very big problem, but it can be pretty annoying if you have to shuffle a lot of decks a lot of times, or just move decks around from place to place. So for the rest of this video, I'm actually going to show you how to add a small little indent or cutout for the fingers to grab the decks easier. So let me show you how I do that. Alright, so we're going to take one of our deck holders here, take our X-Acto knife, and we're just going to make a few little small indents to show the width of the finger hole that we're going to be making here. Make a few small cuts, and basically just trying to make a half round sort of shape. This is actually pretty tricky to do while also underneath the camera, so this cut is very rough, but I do clean it up a little bit later, and this is actually a lot easier to do when not underneath the camera. Alright, so let's see how it is here. I got 2 of the holes in, and it looks pretty good, pretty clean. We're just going to go ahead and take a deck, test it out, see how it looks, see how it works. Alright, so the deck fits just right, and now let's try to take it out. And it's much easier to grab than before. So there's our project. We have our deck holder with 2 little indents so that we can pull the decks out easier if we need. This is a really fast, really easy project, and it actually really helps organize everything. You can take this idea and just expand it to nearly every single component of your game. As always, my name is Will. This is One Stop Tabletop, and if you enjoyed this video at all, go ahead and like and subscribe to this video, and please feel free to share with some friends. Hope you all have fun making those deck holders.